So what I'm going to cover in this session is really just to focus in on those four different use cases. And it's worth taking a step back just to explain why we've done this. So hopefully most of the people on the call will have seen, excuse me, will have seen some of our previous sessions about, how Reveille works, how we carry out our testing, etc. Because although we're only showing four use cases now, there are a whole host of different use cases that Reveille cover. Ryan will have shared the list of tests that are covered for IBM FileNet within the meeting. And if you download that, you'll see there's a whole collection of different tests covering lots of different areas. But what we found is, as we've worked with clients and we've worked with different customers, that there's some of them that we see are repeated. And this is really how we've built out the tests for each of the system, how we extended them. Because what's happened is they've come to us with issues. And if we haven't got tests that cover those particular issues, we've developed them. So we're constantly working to ensure that all of the different use cases are addressed by Reveille for each of the different products we monitor. And that's not just for IBM products. That could be OpenText, it could be Microsoft, it could be Abby, Tungsten, etc. All of the different ECM environments. So the screen you can see at the moment is the Reveille user console. And this is where we first go to start looking at what's happening with the system. Now, if I go in and drill into this, at the moment you can see this is the, basically it's a high-level system status, but what we want to do is drill down into our monitors and see the different systems that Reveille are monitoring. Now, at this level, we can see I'm looking at different products. So the products are really, it's good for a demo, but this isn't how the system would look in a production environment. You would have different elements looking at whether it's processing, looking at metrics, looking at the listener data we capture from the system, looking at different servers. But it's great for a demo because I can drill straight into FileNet and show you exactly what we're covering from a use case point of view. Now, the four use cases are covering basically as I say, areas that we found of interest to clients. The first one is a storage check. It's looking at the storage groups for IBM FileNet to see how much space is left in them. Because what we found is that a lot of organizations were not covering this. They might be covering back-end storage on a server level, but when we looked at storage groups, they weren't necessarily focusing on that. And that was causing issues because there was no monitoring of that. There was no flags to say when they were getting to a certain level and how much was filled within those storage groups. So that was one of the requirements. The next is JVM monitoring. It's looking at JVM issues within the system. So things like heap memory, heap stack, active threads, peak threads, etc. But specifically in this case, what we were looking at is the heap space. If it was exceeding the maximum level that we'd expect, and then if it was, what we could do about it. Next, we'll be looking at indexing health. So really understanding how FileNet indexes content within the system, whether it's processing it correctly. And again, if it's not, how do we know that and what can we do about it? And then finally, overall application performance. What we've seen constantly is if performance is dropping off, there's normally a reason for it, and there's normally a way to resolve that. But what most organizations don't have is any way to accurately record the performance of the system, to look back at a baseline, to see how performance is changing over a period of time, and then to, if they do notice a drop-off, how they can help to resolve that potentially. So let's drill down into our FileNet monitor now and see the detail behind it. Now you'll see here that this FileNet administrator is having a bad day. There's lots of different issues on the system. We've got platform issues, we've got content engine performance issues. And if we hover over one of these, it's not just one issue necessarily, it's multiple issues. So as I said before, it's indexing issues, it's storage issues. There's a problem with the heap space on the WebSphere servers or application server as well. So again, what I've done here is I'm simulating these issues. My system isn't really falling down around me. It's I wanted to show you what it looks like when you would encounter these issues, and again, what you can do about it. So if we look at that first one, think about again back to what I talked about before. It was the storage issue. So this is checking. We've got a test within the platform resource that's checking the backend group storage. What it's looking for is how much space is left within a specific group store. And when it's the percentage left is dropped below a certain level, or the percentage used has gone above a certain level, then it's flagging that up because you'll probably want to do something on it. You might want to raise a ticket to add storage to a specific server to extend that storage group size to allow you to continue to grow without having any impact on the backend system. Now, this is automatically flagged that for me because I've checked this, I've stored the value, the percentage remaining in a metric within Reveille, I'm evaluating it, and I'm flagging that up. And it could have sent me a notification, an email notification, or a ticket in a ticketing system. It might have raised a text telling me something that is I've got to do in that. Now, what it'll also do, if I go into my dashboard, it will show me that data. So I can build out dashboards to allow me to look at all of the information related to this. And you can see this dashboard is reflecting my storage check, my percentage used. It's looking at the backend JVM monitor and looking at things like peak threads, heap memory, active threads, heap space. On the indexing side, it's showing me the index queues and how they're being processed. And it's also looking at the performance. So I've specifically designed this dashboard to look at all the use cases. But you can see we can include any type of information in here that Reveille is gathering. And it's also worth noting that Reveille has a REST-based API. So you can pull this data out of the Reveille system and use it in other reporting tools as well if required. You can generate reports based on this. Alternatively, you can take this dashboard, you can produce it as a PDF and automatically send it to the management team. Or you can send it to the admin responsible to resolve that issue. You can take, as soon as the issue occurs, the system will create a PDF of this dashboard and send it to that user along with the notification. But in this instance, as we said before, this is a storage check. So we can see the percentage used. We've got a check here for 85%, or sorry, a maximum 90%, and it's just exceeding that. So it's using more than the maximum level that we'd expect on that. So what can we do about that? Well, if I go into the admin client, you can see the test within here. So if we go down, we can see the check group storage here. If I go to this resource, and again, the resource is what we call the element that holds the tests within Reveille. So if I go to that resource, the platform resource, you can see I've got some different actions that are carried out if we encounter a specific type of issue on that system. And one of them is to raise a storage request ticket. So not only am I having a notification, I'm also raising a ticket in the ticketing system to say this server, this particular server needs additional storage because we know we've reached the highest level of usage before we do that. So what we're doing is we're saying as soon as it gets to that 90%, raise that ticket, add additional storage. And again, we could have a next notification to say if it gets to 95%, to raise that to a different level, maybe raise that notification to the management team if the storage hasn't been extended. So we're always in control and we know exactly what's happening in the background. Now, the next one was the JVM monitoring. We were looking, again, if we go back into that, we were looking at, in this instance, the heap space, and if it exceeds a certain level on the system. So again, it's exceeded the level we'd expect. So what can we do about that? Well, in this instance, we can potentially restart the service. So again, if we go back in and look at the admin side, whereas before we raised a ticket, what we also want to do is restart the web server, WebSphere service instance. And what that will allow us to do is if we have any memory issues or we have a problem with that service, it's going to restart that. And again, reduce the heap stack for that particular service. It can also send notifications out to the appropriate users to say, okay, this is something that you manually need to do. It doesn't have to automatically do that, but it can send out a notification to say, look, this is what we would suggest. Go and resolve this because this needs to happen. And if it doesn't happen, it's going to cause an issue on the system moving forward. So again, if you think about what we're doing here, it's about Getting that early notification, letting you know that something's changed that may impact the end user. It's giving you the notification to allow you to manually go in and do something. But in the cases where we have got a workaround or a fix on the system, it's automating that fix if required as well. Now, the third use case was about indexing health. And again, on this, if we can see, if we look on the platform, we have a back-end FileNet job to check the indexing processing count here. So this is allowing us to go in and say, right, okay, how are the indexes being processed on the system? And it may be previously that a user would come and say they can't find a particular document. They're using the full text search to actually look for a document in the system, and it's not available. But actually, the issue may be that the document's in there, but it's not being correctly indexed, so they can't find that document. The other option we've seen previously is that the organizations will have a low-level monitoring tool just looking at services, and it will look at the indexing service for FileNet and say, well, it's up and running. But that doesn't always mean that the indexing service is doing what you would expect it to do. So in other words, the service is running, but the indexing health is not appropriate. So the indexing queues are going up and they're not being processed in the way you would expect. So there's lots of indexing jobs sitting there, even though the service is available, it's still not processing those jobs. Now, again, one of the workarounds was this was restarting the indexing service, and that can free up any issues potentially. But you also have the option, if we go into the proactive action, to do whatever you want on that stage. In this case, we're going to restart the indexing service. But we have got a whole load of proactive jobs here. So there's everything from restarting processes, restarting services, executing particular backend commands. We have product specific actions, and all of these actions have been developed based around user requirements. So users coming to us and saying, in this instance, we require to do this if we have this issue. And if it's something that we can see as it has a reuse value to our other clients, we'll roll that back into the product and productize that particular action for the system, exactly as we do with the tests on the environment. So the proactive actions and the tests go hand in hand, really. In this instance, we're running a restart of a service, but if there was something you wanted to do, maybe there was something that is very unique to an organization, or there's a collection of different things you need to do to resolve or at least provide a workaround for an issue, and it's not something that you'd have a typical action for, you could write your own PowerShell script. You could write a PowerShell script, and we can support our clients in doing that to do multiple actions on encountering an issue, and that PowerShell script can resolve it. So that's real flexibility. It's allowing you to do whatever you need to do to ensure the continuity of the system and the minimizing of impact on the end users. Now, the final action was more of a generic one, but the use case was more of a generic one. It was around performance. It's something that we constantly heard about users coming to us and saying, we have complaints about performance from our end users, but we have no way of tracking that performance. We've got no way to look at it. We can't really understand, what is good product performance, what's bad performance. And it's also not subjective necessarily. Those end users are coming to us and saying, well, this performance is not adequate. But when we've looked at it, it's really, it's quite quick to process a document, to log into the system. So we don't know if it's an issue that they're having or if it's just their perception of the system, it's low performance. And this is where Reveille comes in. It allows you to go in to monitor the performance of different transactions, different activities, either synthetically by allowing Reveille to go in and test that, or by looking at what the end users are doing on the system and understanding how the system is performing for them. And it's that combination of both synthetic tracking and user tracking that allows us to give a baseline for performance. We can turn around and say, well, on average, a login should take 3 seconds or 2 seconds. But if it takes more than 2 seconds, we need to flag that up because it's indicative of a problem developing on the environment. Now, it might not be 2 seconds, it could be 5 seconds, but it also gives us an exact average of how long it's taking. It's not something that we're waiting for the end users to tell us. We know how long it's actually taking. And even from an end user point of view, we can go to the transactions they're looking at. We can filter down and say exactly what they've done, how long it's taking to run a search, and explain, what maybe it's something to do when they're running a search. It's the criteria they're entering. They're running a search and they're not using the correct search criteria or the appropriate search criteria for that particular case. So it gives you a lot of insight into exactly how the system's running and how it's performing for those end users. And then also, if it drops below a certain level of performance, or in other words, it exceeds our maximum for a particular transaction or an average transaction, we can flag that. We can provide notifications. We can send reports out to the admin and management teams. And if necessary, again, like those other options, we have the ability to go in and in the instance around performance, actually maybe restart a service, run a proactive job to restart the service on the system, to generate a KPI report, to actually go in and produce a management report and send that out to the organization. So they're completely aware how they're meeting their KPIs, their SLAs, or if they're not, how close they are to do that. And it gives them ideas of what they need to do to improve that performance.